Aints hastily swung his left great sword, but Clementine jumped aside. He knew her trick. Is this a martial art? These were moves to be careful of, skills that didn't exist in Yggdrasil warrior magic. It must protect her sword and give her physical indomitability. That had to have been how she repelled Aints' attack. Tough stuff. What is that armor made of? Adamantite. There wasn't any pain, but at the time of that abrasive noise, he felt something with a sharp point stick into the area near his left shoulder. Shocked, he looked at his shoulder and discovered a slight dent. It may not have had any special magical powers, but this was still armor made by a level 100 caster, and it was proportionally hard. The fact that Clementine had managed to damage it spoke volumes to her destructive power. Well, whatever. Next time I'll hit somewhere less heavily protected. But I wanted to chip away at you till you couldn't move and torture you. Too bad, what a shame. Hearing that she attacked his shoulder not by chance, but because she was aiming to incapacitate his arm, caused Aints to respect her a bit for the first time. Aints always ended up swinging with causing damage in mind. That was sufficient when one sound hit would kill his opponent, but against a tougher one, he had to think about how the battle would play out. It was a good lesson to learn. Okay, here I go. While he'd been admiring her, Clementine had once again taken the odd bent-over posture from before. In response, Aints raised the great sword in his right hand, but this time he didn't thrust out the left sword. Seeing that, Clementine smiled and rushed forward. She was moving so fast, even Aints' dynamic visual acuity couldn't make her out. If she hadn't been coming in a straight line, he might have lost sight of her. She flew at him like a sinister arrow. In response, he carried out his planned attack. The great sword in his right hand swung impenetrable fortress and bounced back against the same martial art from before, but he expected that. The previous time, he had swung as hard as he could, so the rebound had broken his stance. This time he didn't use as much force. The shock felt like hitting a hard wall, but he overcame it with the strength of his arm. Then he swung his left great sword. He was confident she couldn't withstand two of his transcendent full-power blows, but before he could connect, she used a different martial art. Flow acceleration. It made something mind-boggling happen. It was almost as if she had manipulated time. In this sluggish space, everything moved as if it had fallen into a highly viscous fluid. Aints' great sword moved at a snail's pace. Only Clementine maintained her speed in this quiet world. She easily evaded his counterattack and slipped right in front of him. Perhaps it was in Aints' head. He was wearing rings against time manipulation. These rings hindered movement to prevent external forces from slowing him down, not that this couldn't be something new. It must have just been her sudden acceleration, causing him to perceive things that way in his heightened battle mode. After all, he'd seen this martial art before. It hadn't affected him like this. It was a martial art gaze of Stronov had used. Before he could shout, the stiletto stabbed at him. She aimed for the narrow slit in his helmet, his eyes. Aints shook his head to avoid getting it stuck in the slit. The sound of metal grating on his helmet was horrible. Before he could feel any relief at having dodged, he caught Clementine in the corner of his vision. She held her stiletto back, as if coiled and ready to spring. Even taking into account their difference in strength, Clementine's direct line of attack was faster than the arc of Aints' sword. This time she didn't miss. Her sword stabbed into the slit of his helmet. Gah! The puzzled question and flustered grunt occurred at the same time. Pressing his helmet with the hand that held his sword, Aints retreated quite a ways without countering. Watching him from the corner of her eye as she looked curiously at the tip of her stiletto, she joked, "Better stop talking about handicaps. If you don't start fighting for real, you gonna die." Aints didn't say anything, so she asked a question to clear up her doubt. "But how did you not take any damage from that attack? I thought for sure it would be a painful experience." Sheesh. I've learned a lot during this fight, first about a new martial art, and then about how important it is to use your whole body for balance and not just swinging your weapon around. Are you stupid? You figured this out now? Some warrior you are. Well, you're going to die now anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I did want you to answer my question. Was it a defensive martial art? Sensing her annoyance, Aints smiled wryly under his helmet about his qualifications as a warrior. She was right. I really came underprepared. I apologize, but we're running out of time. Let us stop playing games. Ignoring the confusion on Clementine's face, he raised his voice. Nabrul Gamma, show them the might of Nazarick. Ain't spun the hilts of his swords till their blades pointed down and thrust them into the ground. Putting his empty hands out in front of him, he beckoned her gently. Now come at me like you were ready to die. So it wasn't a bluff, huh? You can actually use fly. But how did you dodge that attack? I couldn't see because I was behind the dragon. The voice directed at Nabrul as she slowly descended back to earth was cautious. He couldn't understand why she hadn't used fly to run away, especially after encountering two skeletal dragons who wouldn't pull out if they could. HMPH, you think you have a chance at winning against skeletal dragons with absolute magic resistance? There are many ways for me to win, but first Nabrul grabbed the shoulder of her robe and tore it away. Rejoice, human scum, for you have received the honor of facing Nabrul Gamma of the Pleiades, combat maids loyal to the absolute ruler of the great tomb of Nazarick, supreme being Lord Aints Ul Gaun. All of her gear had transformed. She wore vambraces and greaves of silver, gold, and black metal. The armor looked like a maid outfit from a manga, and instead of a helmet, she wore a white lace headpiece. In her hands, she gripped a staff of silver-coated gold. The performance of custom items in Yggdrasil could be changed by changing their data crystal makeup. Nabrul's robe had the quick change crystal, so she could change her whole gear set without spending any time swapping pieces. The robe was put away into space. Khajiit blinked several times at the maid who had just appeared before his eyes. Then he finally grasped the situation and shouted in disbelief. It was perfectly normal for the caster in front of him to turn into a maid. Her outfit was a joke and made him uncomfortable, but the exceedingly calm look on her face made him panic. He ordered the skeletal dragons to attack. The two dragons approached Nabrul with surprising agility. One of the huge bony monsters went to crush her with a foreleg, but when it was a hair's breadth from whacking her, she cast a spell. Dimensional move. Not again. Nabrul vanished once more. Trying to see where she went, Khajiit remembered last time and looked up in the sky. But this time he would learn where she'd gone through pain. Jaya, his shriek echoed across the graveyard. A white-hot sensation shot through his left shoulder. A dull pain radiated through his body with each beat of his heart. Stupefied, he looked at the spot. He saw a sharp point jutting out. The next second, the blade was ripped carelessly out. This created a new wave of acute pain. Jaya, the vibrations of his bone being sawed propagated through his body. This combined with the pain to increase his discomfort. Blood glubbed out of the puncture. It soaked his black robe. He was drooling from the agony. He spun around to see what had happened. Nabrul was standing there with a puzzled look on her face. Does it hurt that much? NGH. She was toying with a freshly bloodied black-bladed dagger in the hand that didn't hold her staff. Khajiit was in so much agony he couldn't even speak. Because he was a caster, he was rarely on the front lines. So many people waited on him. Although he had occasion to give pain, he was rarely on the receiving end. As a result, he had low tolerance. Clammy sweat coated his forehead. Inside his head, he gave orders to the skeletal dragons. Nabrul leaped away. Fly was faster than running. The dragons inserted themselves into the open space. Behind them, Khajiit, who had secured a safe location, regained a shred of composure. He finally understood the significance of Nabrul's previous spell. It was teleportation magic. Dimensional move was a tier 3 spell. It was generally thought of as an escape spell used to quickly put distance between the caster and their opponent, but that was true for a physically inferior caster. If one had strength that could put a warrior to shame, the spell could be just as valuable as an attack spell. No, since it was unblockable, it was actually better than lesser attack spells. Holding his shoulder, he scowled at Nabrul. I see, so your AC move is teleporting in for the kill. And that's also how you evaded that attack earlier. It was certainly a pesky ace. If magic didn't work on the skeletal dragons, she could kill the summoner. It was an obvious strategy, and if she made effective use of teleportation magic, there was a good chance he wouldn't be able to stop her. But Nabrul scoffed lightly in reply. I don't think so. Khajiit's eyelids fluttered for a moment as he failed to comprehend what she was saying. Then, to clarify, she began to move. I just demonstrated one way I could easily kill you. Nabrul had been at an overwhelming disadvantage, but the moment she seemed to reveal how she would turn the tables, she renounced it instead. Khajiit had no idea why she would do that. Are you insane? I get that you ray a flea, but what kind of reply is that? It'd be nice if you'd use your head a little more. Her frigid glare made his whole body tremble, not from anger but from fear. Anxiety flickered through his mind. Let us end this soon. It's rude of me, as a follower of Lord Aints, to keep him waiting. You seem to think magic won't work on skeletal dragons, so allow me to create a learning opportunity for you, pond skater. The lesson fee is your life. She dropped her staff, and the sound of her hands clapping together rang out. When she pulled them apart, white shocks arced between them. Reacting to the lightning writhing like Chinese dragons, the nearby air sparkled as it discharged. It was like she was enveloped in white light. Khajiit's eyes nearly popped out of his head. He had no more words. He knew she was casting a spell far beyond anything he was aware of. Within the white light frying his eyes, he could see her faint smile. Recalling the huge skeletal dragon standing between them, the clamorous alarm bells in his head made him scream. You can defeat skeletal dragons with magic. They have absolute resistance. Go kill her, he ordered in a trembling voice that betrayed the fear he couldn't hide. As the dragons approached, Nobril smiled like a cruel instructor who was about to educate a foolish pupil. Absolute resistance. You do have resistance, but the power they have is to nullify spells from tier 6 and below. It took a little more time for the dragons to reach Nobril, during which Khajiit realized, with an awfully level head, what she meant by that. In other words, Nobril Gamma can use more powerful magic than that, so they won't be able to nullify my attack. She wasn't lying. Its gut told him that, which meant that this woman's magic could slay the dragons and then kill him too. Why? You're going to destroy the fruit of more than 5 years of labor in less than an hour, Khajiit squawked. Scenes of his past flickered before his eyes like the shadows of a revolving lantern. Khajiit Dale Badantul had a normal childhood. He was the only child of a father with a robust physique, forged by village labor, and a gentle mother. They lived in a remote slain theocracy village. He started down the path to his current self when he found the remains of his mother. That day, the sun was low on the horizon. Khajiit had been racing toward his house. His mother had told him to be home early, but he was late for a reason he couldn't even remember anymore. He'd been on the outskirts of the village looking for cool rocks. He'd picked up a stick and pretended to be a hero, just some stupid thing like that. Thinking his mother would scold him, he flew into the house and saw her sprawled on the floor. Shocked, he panicked. Even now, he could remember the warmth he'd felt when he touched her. You've got to be kidding me. His expectations had been betrayed. His mother was dead. The clergyman said the cause of death was a lump of blood that formed in her brain. In other words, it was no one's fault. No one was in the wrong. But Khajiit felt there was one and only one person to blame: himself. If he had gotten home sooner that day, would he have been able to save her? There were many faith magic casters in the slain theocracy, including several in his village. If he had gone to them for help, would his mother still be alive and smiling? The face of his precious mother, twisted in pain, was a crime he had perpetrated. Khajiit made up his mind. He would live to right his wrong, to bring his mother back to life. The more magic and knowledge he acquired, the bigger the obstacles he faced. There was a resurrection spell on Faith Magic's 5th tier, but he couldn't bring his mother back with it. During the resurrection, the deceased consumed a vast amount of life force. If the body didn't have enough, it would be impossible to resurrect, and it would turn to ashes. His mother didn't have enough life force for that. He didn't have enough time to develop a new resurrection spell, so he would give up being human and turn undead to buy time. That was his conclusion. He abandoned the faith magic path he'd been walking and turned to the path of using magical magic and becoming an undead. But he was confronted with another challenge. It would take a very long time to advance as a magical magic caster, quit being human, and become a powerful undead. There was also the hurdle of talent and ability. It was possible he wouldn't be able to become an undead. His breakthrough plan was to gather a vast amount of negative energy, the amount that killing every person living in a city and turning them into an undead would generate. But at the moment his desire would be realized, someone got in his way. Why should you have the right to make my 5 years of preparation in this city? The feelings I can't forget, even though it has been more than 30 years, all for nothing. You just came out of nowhere. The response to Khajiit's howl was a sardonic smile. I'm not interested in your feelings, but I do have something to say to you for all your laughable hard work. You made a lovely stepping stone for Lord Aints. Twin max chain dragon lightning writhing like a dragon shot out from each of Nabral's hands. The skeletal dragon's giant white frames trembled when the lightning bolts, each thicker than a human's arm, met them. The lightning coiled like Chinese dragons around the skeletal dragon's bodies. It burned up the false life that made the dead bones move. The result was immediate. The skeletal dragons, who were supposed to have absolute resistance to magic, were turned to rubble by magic lightning. Even after they had completely crumbled, the lightning didn't disappear. The two electric dragons raised their heads as if searching for their next prey and raced through the sky to their last remaining target. Khajiit's entire field of vision filled with pure white electric light. There was no time to beg for mercy. There was no time to scream. The tears that welled up in the corners of his eyes vaporized in an instant. Nothing remained but a whisper. Mother Khajiit was devoured by the lightning. His muscles went into convulsions, and his body writhed where he stood, as if he were doing a strange dance. After rapidly burning through his insides, the electricity vanished. Khajiit fell to the ground, smoking from his burns. The stench of cooking flesh wafted throughout the area. Nabral shrugged and called out to Khajiit, whose body had curled up into a ball as his muscles burned up. Even worms smell good grilled. It might make a nice souvenir for Entoma. Dropping the name of her fellow Pleiades member who preyed on humans, Nabral sneered. The warrior before her opened up his arms as if he were going to hug her. What are you doing? Do you give up? No, I just figured that since I gave Nabral the order, I should probably settle this pretty soon as well. Huh. Are you serious? How can you win against me with no martial arts or any decent skills? How much more annoying can you be? How much crap you talk for a wimp? You Ray the wimp, she nearly raged, but instead calmed her seething heart. The man before her had little skill as a warrior, but his physical ability easily exceeded that of ordinary humans. As far as she knew, only two demigods surpassed him: the Black Scripture's extra seat and its captain, who occupied the first seat. But because of that, he swung his sword around however he felt like. This made both his offense and defense sloppy, which meant he was in danger of being dealt a fatal blow. Clementine put on her usual sneer and taunted him. Well, I do agree that we should settle this. Momon the warrior merely shrugged in reply. She coolly observed the way he carried himself. He was full of holes, but that couldn't be true. It had to be a trap, but she didn't have a choice. What she said a moment ago sounded like a joke, but she meant it. She figured she could escape if she could borrow a skeletal dragon. She couldn't afford to lose any more time. Even if it was to throw off the flurry scripture members who had come to the city, playtime was going a little long. She slowly moved into a crouch and tightened her grip on her stiletto. She wanted this critical clash to be short if possible, over in one hit. She didn't have time, but the warrior seemed to be gradually getting the hang of things. It was safer to crush him before he grew into a monster she couldn't handle. With a sharp exhalation, Clementine charged. Stride of wind, greater evasion, ability boost, greater ability boost. She used the same 4 martial arts from before all at once. This would get her physical ability even a little closer to his. Regardless of how Momon had fought so far, there was still the possibility he could use martial arts. In her accelerating world, she could see her opponent's every move. He was going to take his swords out of the ground and attack. Or she could use a martial art or hand-to-hand combat or a hidden weapon, a throwing weapon. She could think of a zillion ways he could attack her, but she was confident she could prevail over any of them. Then he betrayed her expectations. He wasn't doing anything. The Dark Warrior just stood there, arms open, as if he was welcoming her attack. A chill ran up Clementine's spine, fear of the unknown. He was acting completely outside the scenarios she imagined. Should she keep charging or retreat? Those were her only 2 options. Clementine was cold-blooded and cruel, but she wasn't stupid. In the split second left, she calculated countless possibilities and countermeasures. What gave her the push to continue was self-confidence and pride in her abilities. Even though she betrayed them, she was a member of the slain theocracy's strongest special ops unit, the Black Scripture. She could count the number of warriors powerful enough to defeat her on her fingers. There was no way she could run from this Momon character who had no reputation and little skill. Once she made her decision, The rest happened quickly. Her hesitation vanished. She regained the cool composure befitting a top-class warrior. She leaped in close to Momon's chest. Die, the stiletto she thrust, mobilizing all her body's muscles, stabbed into the slit in his close helmet. Then she twisted it. She increased pressure to reach the back of his skull and wiggled the blade to break nearby blood vessels. She wanted to make the wound fatal beyond a doubt. An armored arm wrapped tightly around her body, but she paid it no mind and followed up with another attack. Responding to her desire to kill him dead, the magic power contained in her stiletto was unleashed lightning. Electricity coursed through Aintz's entire body. Clementine's weapon was invested with the power of magic accumulation. The magic was drained in one shot, but it was possible to load up all different spells over and over. One could prepare according to their specific needs. It was a really easy power to use. She stabbed to the back of his skull and left him a lightning souvenir.